We wouldn't have those problems in California, of course. I note with some chagrin that officially today, as we speak, the least safe major city in North America with regard to flood risk is our state's capital in Sacramento. It's nominally currently designed to have an 85-year level of protection. We're trying to raise the crest at Folsom Dam and take off a bit of the inflow peak and get that up to 100. There's also a SAFECA initiated project over the next 5 to 7 years trying to take us up to about 200 level of protection, which would be nice. But you can see that we're not necessarily going to be the big brother among major cities in the U.S. that have these kinds of issues. If you're trying, I guess in vain, to make sense of this plot, my advice is rearrange the horizontal axis in your head and take the horizontal axis as distance from Washington, D.C. Okay. And of course, New Orleans didn't really have that level of protection. They were down at about the 30 to 60 year level, and now they're trying to get the system back up to 100 year level and get them recertified by FEMA before they push forward and try and achieve higher levels of protection. And we don't really think Sacramento, even with Folsom Dam, is going to be at 100 year level because there's also antiquated hydrology data. We have global warming and the hydrology situations changing anyway, and there is seismic risk, which is not yet included in there. So in fact, these are likely to actually be down more or less at these levels also. There's also East Texas, where we've been having a lot of concerned engineers sending us cross-sections and plans and design memoranda for their system, and Florida, where people are deeply concerned, and these may not be very safe regions either. And then you have to ask yourself what's special about these five. One is we haven't studied them yet. But having said that, I want to tell you that I do think that in Kansas City and St. Louis, the levees are significantly better than they are in New Orleans and in Sacramento. And I don't know much about Dallas and Tacoma. That's something to have a look at. But the odds are that a great many of the levees in the United States are designed for 500 levels of protection. And on the left coast, it's not that way right now. So we do have our own sets of issues here. The other thing to learn, though, is that this is not a local southern Louisiana issue, nor is it a Sacramento issue. This is an issue for the entire nation. All 50 states have levees. 33 of those states have enormous miles and miles of levees that protect large populations. And we haven't for 40 years paid proper attention to infrastructure. And the very bottom end of infrastructure is levees and sewers. Of all the things that are creaking and groaning right now across the nation, it's levees and sewers. It doesn't get any less glamorous, as my wife keeps telling me, than levees and sewers. But levees and sewers share a common characteristic, and that is that when you need them, you really need them. Okay, in California, we actually have several levels of levee problems. First one that's most obvious, the city of Sacramento, a city with a population of roughly 500,000, same as New Orleans, which sits at high risk from two sets of attack. One is from river floods, from massive storm runoff from the North Sierras coming down all at once in unmanageable quantities, and the other is from earthquakes. That's highly analogous to New Orleans, where they have the same river risk, and the other one is not earthquakes, it's hurricanes, which are infrequent but potentially catastrophic, just as are earthquakes. We have Stockton at the south end. Stockton's levees are actually in better shape. Stockton's levees are designed right now for a 200-year level of protection, and they appear to be likely at about that level, so they're in somewhat better shape, but they're also seismically vulnerable. But in between, we have the Sacramento Delta. Sacramento Delta is, of course, a massively complex and fragile labyrinth of channels, with 62 islands and 1,100 miles of levees, most of them local and non-federal project levees, and most of them in a very brittle and fragile condition, especially with regard to seismic loading. And there's a third risk to California, and that's everybody else. Besides Stockton and Sacramento and the Delta, which holds our state's water supply hostage, 68% of our fresh water, of course, runs through the Delta, and we draw from it for the Bay Area, and we send a lot of it south, 23 million California, and we get some significant fraction of their drinking water from the Delta. We have all the rest of the state. We have Yuba, Marysville area up here, which had massive flooding less than a decade ago. We've got Southern California. We've got all the southern Stockton area. And the thing about that is we're filling those places in. Right now, the populations at risk are about 2.1 million, but that number is increasing rapidly every year. And we'll look at that also very quickly as we go by. But it's the Delta that is the key piece to all this. Right now, if we lose the Delta, we lose the ability to provide fundamental water supply to about 23 million Californians. And if you do the math, we cannot put 23 million Californians into even the biggest Texas football stadium. They just will not fit. Nor can we keep them there for several years. possibly 3 to 5 in some of the scenarios. So we have a significant risk here to the very heart and longevity of California and the world's 5th largest economy and the economy of the nation.